Hi everyone. If you've just joined us, thank you for joining us on this Wednesday. Up on my screen currently is our hellosmart.com webpage where you can join my class. 10.11.6 is my class ID. I'd love you to join if you can on any device, phone, laptop, Android, anything. I'll give our attendees a few more minutes to buffer in, and then we'll get started. So hellosmart.com, and then 10.11.6 is my class ID. Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know that term 4 is a hectic term and you are probably in the throes of reports, so I do really appreciate you spending this afternoon with me and giving me a little bit of your time. Today we are looking at harnessing the power of feedback using Smart Learning Suite. Feedback is something that I'm very passionate about and something that is directly correlated to improving student outcomes. Before we start, I'd like to introduce you to a few little friends of mine, our smart monsters, and I think it's very fitting that their motto is grow the greatness in every learner. If you're interested in the monsters, we're actually going to be using two today. The monsters can be found here on the Smart Tech website with the /monsters. You can see them all here. You can watch a little video on how they're integrated into Smart Lab. But if you want to meet the monsters, the special thing about each of these monsters is that they have a greatness. Each of their greatnesses are features of their personality and features of their personas that help them to achieve success. And these are things that I use in my classroom to reward my students. So when they're showing accountability, they get the crystal sticker. Sphere shows great collaboration. Lava Lad is fantastic at adaptability. Icebox is a great critical thinker. Seesaw shows great initiative. Bolly has fantastic communication. Hilfi shows wonderful leadership. Dimitri is fantastic with digital literacy. And Lilo has wonderful creativity. Now, I have two of our monsters today, Bolly and Lava Lad, who are going to help us because when giving and receiving feedback, communication and adaptability are key. We want to be able to communicate our goals, we want to communicate our feedback to our students and our students to us clear and effectively, and be able to be adaptive teachers and adaptive students, take that feedback on board and either direct the direction of our teaching to the learning needs of our students based on their feedback, or for our students to take on our feedback and actually improve in their activities and their performance. So who is your trainer? So you can actually see Lava Lad and Bolly here in their Halloween costumes. So each season our monsters will get dressed up. There may be a sneaky Christmas themed monsters coming through, and you can definitely access these. They're available on our Smart Exchange, so you can get these and incorporate them into your Smart notebook decks if you like. So my name is Beck Woolnow. I've been a teacher for 13 years. I was a digital pedagogical coach, which is a fancy way of saying that I help teachers use the right technology in the right way to enhance and augment their teaching and learning and improve student and teacher outcomes in the classroom. And I have become a smart solution specialist, which is fantastic. I'm really excited about that role. So today, what are we going to achieve today? So effective feedback starts with having clear and outlined learning goals for our students so they know what the success criteria is. So today, what are we going to do, or what do we want to achieve today? We want to achieve, or we want to learn what is effective feedback, why is it essential for improvement in student outcomes, what you need for effective feedback, and how do we harness the power of effective feedback with Smart Lab and Response. So what is effective feedback? Now, there is lots and lots and lots of research on what is effective feedback, how to give effective feedback, what you need. And whilst I only have 30 minutes, I will touch briefly on this. I will direct you to a few places that you can go and a few books that you can look through and read if you are interested in diving deeper into that. But essentially, effective feedback supports students to understand what is to be done and how to improve their performance. Part of being a great educator is the ability to make hard concepts easier to understand and the ability to grow greatness in every learner. We want our students to feel great about where they are and excited and empowered about where they can go. And that's where effective feedback gives us the key to that. So this is a very short note on what the benefits of feedback are, because there is a plethora of benefits of effective feedback. John Hattie has done a lot of research over many years on the impact of feedback on student outcomes. And at the end of it, the crux of it, John Hattie and Shirley Clark have actually written a book called Visible Learning Feedback, which is a fantastic story, and it shows that students can actually double their growth over 1 year. Dylan William is also another researcher who has done some research in 2010, and that says that students can improve almost 6 months to or more within a year with the implementation of effective feedback. So feedback, at the crux of it, is essential for the improvement of student achievement. So what do our students need for effective feedback to occur? Our classroom ecosystem must be one where our students feel safe to try. We need our students to feel safe and believe that failure is a good thing, something to be celebrated. We celebrate failures in our classroom all of the time. You'll hear us often cheering for students who have failed, be it in mathematics, literacy, science, or design. It really doesn't matter what we're doing. When we fail, we celebrate it. And the reason is because every time we fail, we show courage to have a go, even if we might get it wrong. My students know that you might fail 99% out of 100 times of doing something, but if you never have a go, you will fail 100% of the time. We show persistence because we get to use my favorite word, yet. We haven't got it yet. We can't do it yet. And this helps our growth mindset to keep trying until we get it right. It works, or until we find the answer. We get to show adaptability, and this is where Lava Lad comes in. And creative and critical thinking skills. We practice changing the way we are looking at something or what we are trying to do. And my favorite, we challenge what we think is right or have done, and we try to come at it from different angles. Sometimes we need to talk to others to work together to figure out solutions. And so we get to work on our communication and collaboration skills. And lastly, when we do get it right, we still look for other ways to achieve success, because we know there's not always one right answer or one way to get the right answer. And so then we become the ultimate problem solver. And this is why I love feedback and failure. And I often find myself saying that feedback is failure's best friend. So what do we need for effective feedback? We need to have clear learning goals. We need teacher to student feedback. We need student to teacher feedback, and we need self and peer feedback. Now I'm going to touch on a few of those today, and you definitely by all means ask me any questions. Please feel free to pop the questions down in the chat. I will have an opportunity to get to your questions later at the end of the 30 minutes, but you can find it down in the chat pod. So just as a reminder, what is found in the Smart Learning Suite. So today we are using the Smart Notebook, and you can see here, this is my deck here, starting from the top all the way to the conclusion of our webinar. It's my linear progression where I build my learning sequence. The Smart Lab here is what we're going to use to gamify some of our content, and it's found up here where the little wolf, I've actually been told that's the Space Invaders icon, or it looks like it, so I've adopted that now. We're also going to be looking at Smart Response 2, which is our assessment tool, and this is this little yellow tick up here. And lastly, our brand new workspace, our digital smart workspaces, where our students can collaborate and cooperate anytime, anywhere, on any device, which is really exciting. So let's look at ways I've incorporated learning goals into some of my learning lessons. And I'm going to try and give you some examples of prep kindy as well as junior college, as I'm a junior college teacher, but also work down in prep and kindy. So this is an example of a year 2 learning objectives page. I always have the lesson standards with the curriculum alignment statements on there for a couple of reasons. Other teachers use my notebook decks, so I need to have the standards outlined there, but also so that students, I can read them to students and they can understand where it's coming from. And then I have lesson objectives. So to be successful in this lesson, we want to be able to tell o'clock and half past, we want to be able to read quarter to quarter past times, and we want to be able to write both analog and digital times. My students are able to come back to these pages if they want to assess themselves or assess their abilities or their skills that they've learnt against the lesson objectives. I run these lessons from Smart Learning Suite online, so my students are able to toggle back and forth through pages as they like, as a self-paced, student-centred unit of work. This is one I've used in prep, and this was an art activity that we had. It's obviously a lot more simplified. We've got Crystal here helping us today, saying follow me, and our success criteria is I can cut out my gingerbread man, use the glue stick to glue on eyes and decorations, and here is my finished product. This is what it's going to look like if I'm successful. And so that's a great example of how you can change your lesson objectives for the grades that you're teaching. So let's look at some Smart Lab examples. Smart Lab is actually awesome for gifting students instantaneous and continuous feedback. It actually alleviates the pressure of teachers getting around to each individual student, because I can hear a lot of you thinking, Beck, I understand how important feedback is. I understand the importance of it. I want it in my classroom, but I'm one teacher and I have 20 plus students. I can't go around and give instantaneous, continuous feedback to each and every single student all day in every single lesson. And you're right, you can't, but you can automate some of that and alleviate some of that pressure, and that's where Smart Lab comes in. So let's have a look at a few examples of where that comes in. So Shout It Out is an amazing class lab tool that I use every single day. This is an example of a Shout It Out that we did at the start of a unit. So we're about to learn about the Great Barrier Reef. And so we've done, what do you know about the Great Barrier Reef? And you can see sharks will eat fish on the reef, and there's beaches. It is dying. You can dive on it. It is Queensland. I think there's even a Nemo lives in there one. We did this in week 1. They had 10 weeks of this unit on the Great Barrier Reef, and they learned a tremendous amount in this incredible unit. And then we did the same Shout It Out at the end. And this Shout It Out shows our students learning. So just by saving this piece of this deck, hitting save, I now have visual evidence of their learning. So now you can see the crown of thorn starfish is bleaching the Great Barrier Reef. There is irukandji box jellyfish live on the Great Barrier Reef, and they kill people. There is single-use plastic in the oceans all around the whole of Australia. Amazing, amazing knowledge from these students who have done 10 weeks of research on the Great Barrier Reef. And so that's a really great way to gauge where students are before you do a unit of work. What do you know about time? Can you show me a shape? And we've got a little example of that one. So this one is, how are you feeling today? You could do a how was your day, or how did you feel about this lesson, or how did you feel about learning about time? So you can have students send in selfies, you can have students send in a passage written about how they're feeling, and you can actually talk about that. So getting that feedback from your students and actually directing your teaching, which is great. So we might do a really quick one if you're okay, so I can show you how to build it. So I've got a new page here. Here is my Space Invaders Smart Lab icon. Shout It Out is down the bottom. I'm going to give you an image. I'll give you 3 images. Let's do a category, and I want to know what you know about shapes. So I can type in circle, square, triangle. I'll give you 3 responses, and I'm going to show my student's name. So you can have the option of hiding the student's name or showing the student's name. Here you can have what kind of contributions they have, whether you do text or whether you do images, and then all you do is hit finish. And it'll create it for you. Now, I can push it out to your devices. Hello, Molly. Thank you for joining. I'm going to push it out to your devices. If you are still keen to join, you can go to hellosmart.com 10.11.6, and I can start that right now. And Molly, you should be buffered straight in. What we can do is we can get students to send up their answers and actually discuss them straight away. So we can talk about their answers when they have submitted them. I'm going to join just so that you can see how quickly it will come up. Thanks, John. Awesome. So we've got a few people joining now, which is great. We actually did this in a prep class a few weeks ago, and we had some little friends send in their photos of their shapes. One little friend sent in a photo of an eye in circle, and upon reflection of that, we had a discussion about whether that was in fact a circle or not. We got out our pen and we traced the eye, and we decided as a class in prep that that was probably not a circle, it was probably an ellipsis. But my little friend replied back, in fact, I didn't take a photo of the outside of the eye, I took a photo of the colored bit of the eye, which we discovered in fact was a circle. And just by her giving me that feedback showed me where her thought process was, but also it allowed the other students to have a reflection on their thought process and think, well, Mrs. Warner, can we have another go at that? Because they wanted to go and find hidden shapes. Awesome, thanks, Molly, that's beautiful. We could also talk about, Molly, that's a fantastic example, but I can also see a couple of other shapes in there. Can you see some shapes in there as well? So I can see what looks like a triangle, and now I'm drawing with my mouse, so please forgive my appalling annotations there. And that's awesome. Thanks, Claire, Tony, and John for joining. I will continue on and give you plenty of opportunities to join some of our activities. But a way that I've used it in our writing stimulus is in this way. So this is an example of a lesson that I have taught with a teaching partner. Our school was heavily focused on feedback and how our students were using our feedback to improve the student outcomes. In this case, it was a writing tool. So we gave them a writing stimulus. They rolled 2 dice, which are these ones here. They rolled the dice to get their writing stimulus, so they got their characters. So this little friend got a snake at the beach. And then I was lucky enough to draw the short straw and end up with the analog version of this example. So what we had to do was we had to run the lesson and then report back the results. So I did the analog version, and my teaching partner and I did the digital version. So what it entailed was getting the writing stimulus. I sent my students away and they wrote their sizzling start. So we had focused on sizzling start for 2 weeks. My students sat down and wrote their sizzling start. Then they came back to me. They sat in a circle. We each shared our sizzling start. We all went round and gave feedback. I gave feedback to the students. Their peers gave them feedback. I went round with my red pen and marked spelling and punctuation and tried to give them as much feedback as possible, and then they went away and tried to put that feedback into their next writing. So they rewrote their sizzling start using that feedback. Now we did that 3 times. It took over 2 days. because it took quite a lot of time to give that feedback, and their writing did improve a great amount, and I was very, very proud. Before the third session of writing, so they wrote it 3 times, before the third time they wrote it, I had to actually take their books home because it was time to go, and gave them their books back. Now, that feedback was effective, but it was not as effective as this example here. So the next day we went in and we did a digital version of this activity. We put our students into red group, blue group, and green group, and we sent them away and we gave them the same writing stimulus. Now, our students went away and we said, okay, we want your first attempt up on the board. This little group got an elephant in a library. This little group got a kangaroo in a cave. And I think this little group got a kangaroo in space. Now, we read these examples and we said there is an elephant that ripped all the pages off the bookshelf. Now, I talked about that's a good sentence, but you don't have any alliteration in there. There's no adjectives. I can't see any punctuation. It's a start, but it's not a sizzling start. We looked at this one and talked about that the sentence didn't make sense, and that we need to have a think about how to make that more engaging and make sense. This one ended up being my favorite. And I said, flash, wow, I like that. But I didn't read it like that. I read flash. And they said, that's not how you read it. And I said, well, you haven't actually told me how to read it because you haven't given me the right punctuation to tell me how to read it. So they went away and they had another go. And you can see that our first group has now looked at our third group and said, okay, she likes onomatopoeia. So how is our character going to move? Thump, thump, thump. And you can see our punctuation is starting to creep in. This little group is starting to make sense, which is awesome. And this group is now using the correct punctuation, but also technical language, which I was loving. Finally, we got down to our final attempt. And this is what we got. Now, this shows a tremendous growth in their capabilities and their writing. From being able to show them exactly what I'm after, they were able to put that into place straight away. And the ability to take that feedback and that power of that feedback and put it into their writing straight away had great impact on the outcome of this activity. Now, they were also giving peer feedback as well, which is so important. The peers were measuring themselves up against each other, but then also giving great constructive feedback. And we talked about how to give constructive feedback. So this lesson was not only on writing, but communication, feedback, being able to take that on board, having a growth mindset, everything. So this was a really great lesson that we used. This lesson, as opposed to my lesson that took 2 days, this one took 30 minutes. And then our students went away and wrote their own individual sizzling starts, and I'm sad to say that theirs was a lot better than our writing. Our writing was great, but this writing was exceptional. Another example of how to use ClassLab is by getting ClassLab to give our students feedback straight away or automatically. Now, this is a game on French verbs and nouns. I'm going to start this and push this to your devices if you're still with me. Thanks, Claire, Tony, and Molly. Even if you don't know French, what you'll notice is that when I take my sort, I apologize if that's the incorrect pronunciation, my little guitarist will play a riff if I get it right. So I get positive feedback when I get it right. Let me take this one and pop it into verbs and see what happens. If I get it wrong, he gets a little bit electrocuted. So my students are getting feedback in a gamified way, in a fun way. So even if I don't know that, if I don't know French, I know that this word is not a verb, it's actually a noun. And so now she plays a riff. So I can choose for students to get this feedback in different ways in ClassLab, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But this, I guess, is a great way to show that whilst I don't know French, I can actually use the feedback I'm getting from the game to correct what I'm doing. This one is a great one to play with preps. We talk about weather, sunny and cold. or warm and cold. I play this two students to one, or one iPad, sorry, or one iPad to 3 to 4 students. We can play it in a group. They have big discussions on where each piece of clothing should go. There's lots of discussions on, well, I wear shorts when it's cold. So they have, I'm opening up this activity for our students to build those communication skills. So if they pop it into cold, the little spaceship will shake and actually kick it out. And then they'll know that, well, when it is sunny and when it's warm, that's probably okay to wear shorts. It is a great activity. I can choose to, in fact, allow it to go into the incorrect one if I wanted to use it as an assessment. And I'll show you that and how to change that in a little bit. Sorry, I am going quick because I have noticed that the time has gone very, very quickly. The reason you want to be able to change whether they get feedback instantaneously or whether they need to wait till the end of the game is simply for the type of feedback you want them to do, or the type of activity that you are doing. In a comprehension activity like this one, you'll notice that I have chosen for them not to get feedback until they have asked for it, until they've completed the activity. So they need to be able to have put all the words in the correct spot, or not in the correct spot, into the spot that they believe that these can be in. Now I know that these are in the wrong ones, but I will do them quickly so that you can see them going in. And now I can check for answers. So when you're doing a comprehension, or when I'm using comprehension for literacy groups and I'm pushing out individual comprehension activities to each individual group, depending on what they're working on, whether it's punctuation, adjectives, or a type of language feature or punctuation, I always get them to do their comprehension at the end, check the answers at the end. So you can see that I've obviously gotten all of these wrong. Now, a way to do this, to show you, is when I'm doing my class labs, if I'm doing a fill in the blanks, I can define my blanks, but then over here it says check answers. Now I can check answers when prompted. I can do it instantly so they bounce out, or I don't check at all if I want to use it as an assessment. If you are using it as an assessment, you want to use one of these gamification activities as an assessment, on your iPads, if you're using iPads, all you have to do in settings is turn on the record button. So when you want students to record them actually playing the game, I get my students to swipe down and hit the record button, where and that means the iPad is then recording its screen, and then they play the game. So it's recording them playing the game. We use Seesaw at my school to upload their work, so my students will then stop the recording and then upload that to Seesaw. They don't realize that they're actually doing an assessment. I'm getting instant feedback from them via their videos on how they went, which is great. And we're also going paperless, which is wonderful. All I have to do is hit next. I'm going to do instantly now so that you can see the difference. I'm going to choose my skin and then finish, and then it'll populate the game. And then you'll see that this one will now stay in when it's correct and give them a tick as soon as it's correct. So it's giving them that reinforcement, that positive reinforcement. A green tick, it bounces, you did great. Or a red cross, you need to redo it. This one, again, is a prep version of one that we've done. I had them screen record what they were doing, and they retold the gingerbread man. So, and they had to put them in order of where the gingerbread man would go. And it was a really great activity. I've obviously chosen this one to be checked at the end. So once they've finished and once they've put all of them in, so that they get them in order, I used it as an assessment. So I got them to screen record, it checked it, and then it showed me how they went. I'm going to just show you one more class lab, and then we're going to go quickly to response before we run out of time. But this again is another one that we can check where our students are using subitizing one-to-one. If they get it right, the little soldier protects himself. If they get it wrong, we end up as a crispy critter, which they love. So it's giving them that feedback. If you're doing it in pairs, which I usually do with preps, they start talking about, we need to count the count them, 1, 2, this is a 2, this is a 5. So they're having that peer communication, giving each other that feedback as well. So they're not only, I'm not walking around going, oh, do you want to count those numbers again? Do you want to have another look and see if you've got that right? It's actually doing it instantaneously for me and taking that load off me so that I can walk around and actually focus on supporting or extending students that I need to or that I've identified. A couple of tips and tricks with SmartLab. When you are doing a SmartLab activity, the best tip I can give you is this little line thing up here. It says manage content. So hit the manage content. You can see I've got my student lists here. I've got a couple of student lists. I've also got some vocab lists. So you can actually match pairs, you can do a quiz. A single list is awesome if you're going to put in spelling lists that you will use frequently. So if you're using Words Their Way or another spelling program where you want a single list of words that you will use constantly, create single lists in here and you can use that list in every single game rather than having to retype them out. But the student list one is so much fun. Type in, I always do, year 2, and then put the date, and then all you have to do is do your student names. Now the reason you do that is so that when you go and play a game, say you want to play it on the board, because you can play games 3 ways. You can play them on the board, you can play them on the board or on devices or both, or you can play them in Smart Learning Suite online where they work through the games at their own pace. So if I were to hit this star now, I can choose a randomizer hat. I'm going to give myself a student list. I'm going to say, let's use my Darwin training group, hit done. And now every time I hit this hat, a name's going to pop up on the board. And now they love this. It turns into a game of The Price is Right. Their name comes up on the board. They all squeal and run down and have so much fun. It could be the most mundane of content, but having this element of gamification in here and being able to turn it into this amazing fun thing, the students will want to be involved, they want to be a part of it, and it's really awesome. So that's probably my biggest tip, is going to that managed content. Now the last thing before I do let you go, and I do apologize that I have gone a little bit over time, is Smart Response. Now I use Smart Response in a couple of ways. A, to find out where my students are at that time so I can use it to direct my teaching. So I'm able to custom curriculum based on the results of my Smart Response, and also to see where my students have understood a concept that I've taught, or have they moved up, or do I still need to focus on those students with that. You do need to be signed into your account to do your Smart Response. So if you have a look up here, I am signed in. You need to be able to have your class ID. Mine is 1011-6. And so your Smart Response can be found here, this yellow button up here, and the best way to show you a Smart Response is by running one. So if you are still with me, and I do thank you for that, I am going to quickly run a Smart Response for you. It's only 6 questions, and I'll show you exactly how I use it in the classroom. I'm just letting it load now. Claire, Tony, John, and Molly, thank you so much. You're about to go into my Smart Assessment. I've just started it here. I can see that it's just loading a little bit and waiting. And what you'll see is once it starts, it'll actually tell me where my students are, how many questions they've started. So you can see it's starting to run now. It should be buffering into your devices now, and you can see that I can see Molly has answered 1 out of 6 questions. Tony's now 1 out of 6 questions, and what that tells me is I don't have to wander around the classroom and wonder if they're stuck or if they understand a question. If I see 2 or 3 that might be stuck on question 3 and they haven't moved for a while, and maybe a few people are stuck on 2, I can just hit pause for a minute and say, okay, I blocked everybody's devices. They can't do another question. I want to bring everybody's attention to the board. Let's show the questions and let's have a chat about them. So I can see this is question 1. I can see everybody's a few people are having trouble with question 3. So let's go to question 3 and we'll read it. Something of life on Earth is aquatic. Now, what you can do here is talk about how we can get rid of some silly answers that you think are definitely not right, or how can we narrow it down. I can talk about, well, depending on the question, are you using the images? Are you using all of the questions? So we can talk about test literacy here as well and assist students so they're not sitting there feeling inadequate. They're not sitting there feeling worried about letting you know that they don't know what they're doing. So this gives me a quick access to seeing who is actually might be struggling with this assessment and who might, what students might need a little bit of help. I can resume it really quickly. My students then get buffered straight back into the assessment. They can continue answering. I'm going to quickly end it there, and I'm sorry, Claire, Tony, and Molly and John. I know that that's really frustrating when you're trying to do that. What we can do is we can actually go through and see our class average answers and talk about our answers and do that test literacy activity again. But the best part of it is actually being able to export my results. Now, you don't want to show your students results on the screen. What I usually do is give them a manipulative to do or send them off to do another example. And what I can do is I can bring up this Excel spreadsheet and group my students according to how they went. Green is obviously they've got it correct. Red means they've got it incorrect. So what I can read from this is I can actually group these students into their ability groups and set a set amount of games for them to play on this focused activity. Say in mathematics, if I'm doing time, whilst I walk around and support or extend students that I've identified in here. Now I can also see, this is great feedback for me as a teacher, I can see that question 3, no one's gotten right. Now if I've taught this already, I can then have a look and go, well, maybe it was something, maybe I didn't hit that hard enough as a teacher, or maybe I need to look at the way I've actually taught that, or maybe I need to review that and come at that from a different angle. Maybe they haven't quite grasped what I've taught there. So it's really great feedback for me to direct the way of my teaching, where I'm teaching. So it affects my actions as a teacher, which is great. And then I can obviously run this again and see which students have understood the concept and which students still need support. So that's smart response. I do apologise for going over. If you do have any questions, please let me know. I did rush through that quite quickly. If you do want to save an assessment, you do hit the save. I was going to show you quickly how to do that, but I won't hold you any longer. There are plenty of resources for you to look at in Smart Response, so in the Smart Support website, and I can put all of these links at the bottom of the YouTube. There is actually activities that you can do to learn about Smart Response. Smart Classrooms, which is our YouTube, have lots and lots of videos of Smart Response and how people are using Smart Response and Class Lab in their classroom. And then this one is definitely one I recommend. It's on the Smart Tech website. You go to the education section, go to training, and the first one is the Smart Digital Educator. That is definitely one that I would recommend if you haven't done any. If you would like, I will toss it over to questions. Crystal, do we have any questions at the moment? You can get your the Smart Monsters currently are in Smart Exchange. So if you go to the Smart Exchange website, you can go to the United States one up here, make sure it says United States because they are docked in there, and all you have to do is search for Smart Monsters and download this. Once you download the Smart Halloween Monsters deck, you can get them here, and they're all movable, so you can pull them from one notebook to the other. And you'll have access to those. Now, there will be another one of just the plain monsters out of their Halloween costumes. So if you do want to use them in your Smart Notebook decks, feel free. It's coming in the next couple of days. And keep an eye out for maybe Christmas themed monsters. I have heard whispers of that happening, hopefully. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. My email address will be included in the description box under our recording. Otherwise, feel free to hit to scan our QR codes or screenshot this. Helen and I are both on Instagram and LinkedIn. If you have any questions, please ask us. We screen record our tutorials all of the time. If you've got a question, Beck, how do I change the type of feedback my students are getting from Class Lab and you can't remember, just hit me a question and I will screen record and tag you in it on my Instagram page. All right, thanks so much for joining joining us, everybody. Apologies for going over time. I hope you've got something out of this afternoon. If you are looking for any information or a deep dive into feedback, feel free to have a look at John Hattie and Shirley Clark's Visible Learning Feedback. It's a great read. And have a wonderful Wednesday. Good luck with the reports and enjoy the rest of the term. Bye.